So continuing with author diaries, I'm going to talk a little bit about my main character. A little bit about him in general and a little bit about how I've developed him over the drafts of this. And I'm continuing to develop him because I am still revising as I shoot these. So my main character is named Ferris. He is 17 years old, which would sort of by default kind of put the book in the middle grade range. I talked to Liz about it, like, do you think it's young adult? She's like, I don't think so. It's so she's a school librarian, so I'm taking her word on it. Not that I set out to write a middle grade book, but that's something to talk about later. So he's 17 years old. He is a fire elemental. In the world of the book, still currently titled Dreams of Fire, elementals are people who begin to exhibit an elemental force within themselves, usually around 15, 16, 17. And it is a force that builds up inside of them and that they release out into the world, and they have virtually no control over it. And there are various types of elementals. There are water elementals, wind elementals, earth elementals. Ferris is a fire elemental. So he has these forces, this fiery energy that builds up, and when he unleashes it, and he has to, he cannot hold on to it forever. It is obviously very destructive. So he is in a very active situation. Even as the book opens, he's already on the run. He is resourceful, but also nervous. He is not used to being on his own. He is not used to improvising. He finds he's surprisingly good at it, but it's not his comfort zone. He wants to have a plan, but he can't. There's too much uncertainty going on for him to formulate a solid plan, and that makes him nervous. That makes him anxious. And him being anxious can make the fire come faster sometimes. He means well. He absolutely does not want to hurt people, anybody. If he felt he could get help in a way that wasn't just isolating him and removing him from society, he would seek help. But he's pretty sure that's what's going to happen to him. So he has to run. I kind of landed on Ferris as the main character. I'm not going to say by default he was always kind of the main character, but I had to focus on him as I worked on revisions. So earlier drafts of the book had a much more ensemble nature to the story. I had a lot more POV characters. And I don't mean that like you literally get their point of view and it goes into like first person or anything like that. But I had a lot more characters who I would focus a scene around, and like so at the book as it exists right now has 3 POV characters. There's Ferris, and basically the 2 characters who are interested in capturing him. Professor Rains and Garion. Those are the 3 characters who are granted POV. Earlier drafts of the book, I had POV for at least 2. If I remember correctly, it might have been 3 characters who were granted some degree of POV. For anyone coming back and watching these after the book's actually out, I used to have POV for Arbiter Lerac. I used to have POV for Tamalian. I think Arya had POV at one point. But I ended up scaling a lot of that back. And it was tough because Ferris was always the focal point of the plot. The major plot points pivoted on and around him, but he wasn't really the proper focus for a while. And part of that, honestly, was I did not find him as interesting as some of my other characters. Which, once I realized that I needed to have it be more focused on him, unless I was going to completely rebuild the narrative and the plot from the ground up, which I didn't want to do because I did like my plot, then I needed to find a way to make him more interesting. And it's tough with lead characters sometimes because they need to be the window into the world more often than not. And if you, I'm not even sure if this is the right term, but if you over-characterize them, it can sometimes be off-putting to your readers and be like, oh, well, you know, this person is too rigidly this thing, and I don't get that at all. If you're trying to have someone that the audience is meant to relate to, and you're going for a broad audience, you need to have a certain amount of malleability to them. But, you know, if you're going for a niche audience, you can make it much more zoned in. But I was going for a broad audience. So there you go. And this also came back to me as I started getting beta reading feedback that people weren't getting Ferris, that they saw what he was doing but didn't know why he was doing it enough. So that's one of the things I'm working on right now with the revisions as I'm writing this, is getting inside his head and into his thought process more, so that hopefully readers will understand the character behind the actions. Because I feel like right now what I have is a lead character who is a series of actions and reactions more than he is a fully fleshed character. At least, especially early on in the book. I think he gets better as it goes, but I got to work on that front end. And main characters are tough. I am not going to lie to you. It is hard to come up with a character that is going to move the plot forward. And like I said, be a little bit malleable, because my approach is not, I'll let the characters determine where the story goes. No. I need to know where the story's going. And the main character, more than anybody, I need to be able to direct them where I want them to go. Things are slightly more freeform with supporting characters, because I don't need that. If they go off and do their own thing, that's fine. They're allowed to leave the story, and I can bring in somebody else or whatever. The main character, I need them there. I need them focused. And I feel like in the process of writing, I kind of over-focused on his plot utility to the detriment of his character. And I'm working on that right now. So this particular author diary, a bit less of a, here's how I approach the main character, and a bit more of a, here's how I'm trying to fix the main character at time of recording. Because it's not easy. And another thing I'm sort of, I'm learning about myself is I've spent so long, so when I think in terms of story, I tend to think in a stage or a screenplay more than anything else. Because I've written those and like completed and felt a bit more at home in those formats, partly because I don't need to overly describe the thought mentality of the characters, because I'm leaving it for an actor to interpret. But if you're writing a book, you can leave a certain amount interpretable to the reader, but an actor's not going to do the rest of the work for me. I got to do it myself. And that's another thing I'm learning through revision. I feel like this entry actually ended up being more about the revision process than about the main character, but it is what it is. I'm not scripting this. So that's a little bit of insight into my main character in my book, and sort of how I am trying to refine and bring him to where he needs to be for this thing to work. So that's my thoughts for this one. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next time.